My name is Kelly Lynch. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, retired EMT, certified personal trainer, and certified nutrition coach.
So what inspired you to get into the mental health field?
That is a whole story in and of itself. I've been a therapist now for 15 years, and there was two reasons actually that I went into social work. So I like to joke around with people that social work is my Bob Ross moment of life. It's my happy accident. But I got into social work as an extension of working first in EMS. As I said, I'm a retired EMT. I was on the road as an EMT for 10 years prior to becoming a therapist, and I became an EMT as a result of 9/11, and also having a family member who struggled with mental illness quite a bit, and wanting to be able to figure out how to help this family member in any way that I could. At the time, I didn't know anything about mental health or mental illness, how to support people through their process. And I figured, you know what, if I have at least some medical knowledge, that's the next best answer to not knowing what I don't know. And then in regards to 9/11, EMS was my way of wanting to give back to my little corner of the world. And in the process of the 10 years that I was in public safety, I realized that I was just good at talking to people and good at working with people through the challenges that they face in life, and really fell in love with that part specifically. So social work became the next best or the next most logical step.
With being an EMT, you're dealing with, some people's worst days and you got to be strong for them and it's tough for you. What are some of the challenges of being a EMT for people?
I think that one of the most important things for folks to remember is that when someone else is in their worst moment, that doesn't mean that it's your worst moment or your emergency. And so to be able to maintain a perspective of, I'm here to help, but I'm not here to be consumed by the chaos and consumed by the fear, right? I'm here to be that person who can be that steady hand through a scary moment. I think is an important perspective to really keep sight of. And that's something that I have found has held very true through my therapy career as well. Of that, like there's a separation of church and state, so to speak. Of that, I'm always going to have that compassion and that empathy for the people that I'm holding that space for, but to remember that this is their story, not mine, and that I'm a witness to what that story is, and a guide for how can we develop a different kind of story.
Can you tell me a little bit about your own mental health journey?
Sure. There's been a lot of things that, as anybody could say, that I've also been through in my own life. The 10 years of being on the road through public safety, there's a lot of different things that I've seen and been exposed to that have certainly left a mark and have left their impact. But at the same time, there's personal stories that also color in the way that I move through the world, as is true for all of us. So when I was young, I had scoliosis surgery when I was 13 years old. And that has impacted my physical mobility and has impacted the choices that I make about what kinds of physical activities I choose to engage in. But I have a huge surgical scar. So there was a lot of bullying that I experienced when I was a kid, because kids are going to do kid things and they're not always nice, right? So being able to look at how that's impacted the way that I view my body and the way that I perceive myself and my worthiness has really evolved significantly over the years. But then I have other stories as well of that, I'm a divorced single mom, and my ex-husband and I currently have a great relationship, which I'm very proud of us for. But it was not always like that. I left the marriage because I perceived it as being dangerous and as being very unsafe for myself and for my daughter. And to go through the process of what was a very contentious divorce and a very contentious relationship after the divorce was finalized for quite a few years was very difficult, right? Like there were a lot of very dark moments that I experienced of figuring out, how do I want to live as a single mom in a way that I can feel proud of and set a good example for my daughter in what it means to be a strong woman and a strong person and live in an empowered way in spite of all of the other things. I think that's something that is a message that's really important for all of us, that we all are going to have a different journey through.
And I saw that you wrote a book. What was it like being an author?
I did. So I recently published my first book. It's available on Amazon, and it has been a whole a journey in and of itself. To write the book from start to finish was about 18 months, and I had this idea of what I wanted the book to be. And to really be able to put out something to the world, to be able to say to people, hey, if we can't work together as client and coach or client and therapist, here's another way to get access to the work that I do. So I created two methodologies. One is called grit and the other is called power. Grit is all about how to live well without feeling pressure to have to live perfectly. Right. And it really walks people through a process of how can we get our mindset squared away and then build resilience and our value systems and all of the things that we need skill wise in order to really live well and live in an empowered fashion. And then power is all about solving problems effectively and confidently. And it walks people through the process about how to use discernment to really decide what information is useful in the process of solving problems versus what information is just extra stuff that we don't really need, how we can manage our nervous systems so that we're not in chaos while we're trying to manage chaos, um, and then be able to really understand the impact that solving problems can have on us. This is something that I've developed over the 15 years of being a therapist now, and am so excited to be able to bring it to the world and put my ideas together in a cohesive, coherent way.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about your philosophy, the grit and power?
Sure. So I like I said before, I think that life isn't meant to be lived perfectly. It's meant to be lived well, right? And
Mhm.
to live life well really means that we embrace the imperfection that naturally, organically happens for all of us while not getting dragged down by that imperfection, right? Like there's pieces in that to actually really celebrate because the imperfection is what colors in our lives in these really exciting and unique ways, right? And then when we look at how we solve problems, right? Like problems are inevitable for any of us, right? Like there's no getting away from that part. So when we look at the problems that are inevitable to life, how we meet those problems head on to be able to manage them and really look at how can we work our way through those problems without trying to avoid anything. There's a level of confidence and empowerment that can come out of that that we deserve to be able to experience in our lives, right? Like otherwise it's just going to end up feeling like problems drag us down and that everything kind of sucks and feels bad when it doesn't have to be that, right? Like we can be excited and empowered by being able to work through something and feel really good about what the end result looks like.
Do you see your clients' confidence rise when you work with them from the beginning to later on?
Absolutely, but it's not about me working with them. It's about them walking their talk, right?
Yeah.
And learning what it looks like to walk their talk. And that's going to be different for everybody. When somebody is able to take skill sets and take information so that they can fill in the figurative blank spots that they've got, and they figure out how to name what they didn't previously know, there's such a shift in them becoming their own best expert and becoming their own authority, right? Like you are the only person who can be your own best expert because you're the only person living your own life, right? There's nobody else doing that on your behalf. So when we grant ourselves that level of expertise and when we grant ourselves that level of authority to be able to say I am my own best expert and I do know what's best for me because I'm walking my own path. There's a level of just joy and confidence that can come out of that is so cool to get to bear witness to.
What do you do to help your own mental health?
I have to walk my own talk, right? Like just the same as I say that to everybody else is that like, look, you've got to walk your talk. If this thing, whatever the thing is in that moment, is something that you say you believe in, then what does it look like to live through that? And for me, that is living through this lens of grit and power that I've created. Because if this is what I preach, then I have to make sure that I'm also living according to that lens.
Have you seen just the stigma of just talking about mental health lessening?
I have, which is actually really exciting. And I think that that's a really cool generational shift that's starting to happen as a result of millennials and then the generations that are following millennials up. Gen X and prior to Gen X, there was such a stigma around mental health and
Yeah.
that like keep it in the house and keep it among the family and we don't talk about it and we have to keep it all under lock and key because otherwise you're weak or you can't handle things or you're this, that, and the other thing. Whereas in I'd say about the middle of the millennial generation, this really interesting shift started to happen where we started to say, hey, no, I'm not okay in certain kinds of moments. And it's okay to talk about that because talking about it is how we fix it. Or if we can't fix a certain part, we can learn how to manage a certain part. But by keeping it under lock and key and keeping it as this like dark taboo
Yeah.
thing, that's making it worse, right? Or that doesn't help anything. So by bringing light to these topics and by being willing to be more vulnerable in the way that we talk about mental health, this is the way to actually just resolve things or manage things again in a way where we can all feel really empowered.
What would you say to anyone going through a tough time right now?
Take the time to take good care of you first and to honor what it is that you feel and why you feel that way. After you've done that, then start to think about strategy for how you want to manage that and work your way through it to a different point. Right? There's always going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. It's just a matter of making sure that you keep putting one foot in front of the other.
What motivates you?
My daughter. So my daughter she's actually home today for President's Day. So she's somewhere in the house, probably hanging out with her dog. Um, my daughter is the biggest source of inspiration for me, not only in who she is and the way that she shows up to the world in her on her own terms, but also because I want to be a good role model to her and for her. Right. I want to show her constantly what it means to chase your dreams and to not take no for an answer for the things that really matter the most to her. So being able to live through that and to look at that as this is my reason to keep putting my own feet in front of the other, right? And to keep moving forward. It just matters so much to me.
Yeah, what have you learned from her?
Oh my goodness, so much. So much. So she constantly reminds me of the purpose of being playful, right? And because it's easy for me to just fall into a place of just working because I love what I do, right? But loving what you do is an easy recipe for becoming a workaholic. So she reminds me to take breaks and to be playful and to take time to be creative and to do things that are silly and goofy and fun, right? Like kids are such a cool way for us as adults to get that reminder of don't forget about that childlike part of you because that part doesn't go away. That part doesn't stop, right? But that part needs to also be nurtured at a consistent rate so that it can shine its own light into the world.
Where do you want to see your mission, say, in the next 3 to 5 years?
Gosh, I would love to be on stages talking about grit and power to the world wherever I can and however much I can, because I think it is just, I've seen such a positive impact of these two models for my own clients to be able to bring it to wider audiences so that people really can go and live on their own terms and live by the set of rules that they create for themselves. It's that idea is so exciting to me. So to be able to just continue to speak this message into as many people as I possibly can and in front of as many people as I possibly can would just be amazing.
How can people reach out and learn more?
Sure. So you can find me at my website, which is www.thegritproject.com. But grit is spelled with two I's. That's important. If you don't spell it with two I's, you're not going to find me. So again, it's thegritproject.com. And you can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at my handle on all three platforms is I am Kelly Lynch. And there's a YouTube channel that is coming soon.